In a quiet little town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, life moved at a slow, predictable pace. The streets were lined with modest homes, each with its own garden bursting with colorful flowers. People knew their neighbors by name, and the air carried a sense of safety that comes from living in a close-knit community. This was the kind of place where doors were often left unlocked, and children played freely until the streetlights flickered on at dusk. For 18-year-old Maya Patel, this town had been her entire world. She grew up here, attended the local schools, and dreamed of one day leaving to explore bigger cities, but for now, she was content with her simple life. Maya was the kind of girl who stood out not because she was loud or flashy, but because of her quiet determination and kindness. With long dark hair, warm brown eyes, and a smile that could light up even the gloomiest days, she was well liked by everyone who crossed her path. Her friends often joked that she had a superpower for making people feel seen and heard. Whether it was helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries or tutoring classmates after school, Maya always went out of her way to lend a hand. But what truly set her apart was her strong sense of justice. From a young age, she questioned things. That didn't seem fair. From why some kids got more attention in class to why certain families struggled while others thrived. This curiosity about fairness shaped her dreams of becoming a journalist someday, someone who could shine a light on truths hidden in the shadows. After graduating high school earlier that year, Maya spent her days working part-time at the local library, shelving books and assisting patrons. It wasn't glamorous work, but she loved being surrounded by stories, both real and fictional, that transported her to different worlds. In the evenings, she took care of her younger brother Rohan, while their mother worked long shifts as a nurse at the nearby hospital. Life wasn't easy for the Patel family. They lived paycheck to paycheck, relying on each other to keep everything running smoothly. Still, there was love in abundance, and Maya cherished the bond they shared. On weekends, when her mom finally had time off, the three of them would sit together around the kitchen table, laughing over homemade meals and planning for the future. One summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky, in shades of orange and pink, Maya decided to take a walk through the park. It was one of her favorite places, a sprawling green space dotted with towering oak trees and winding paths that led to a small pond where ducks paddled lazily. The park was usually bustling with activity during the day, filled with joggers, families, and dog walkers. But as night fell, it grew quieter, offering a peaceful escape from the busyness of daily life. Maya needed this moment of calm after a hectic week at work and home. She slipped on her sneakers, grabbed her phone, and headed out, breathing in the cool evening air. As she strolled along the path, the sound of rustling leaves mingled with distant laughter from a group of teenagers gathered near the basketball court. Maya slowed down, curious about the commotion. Peering through the trees, she saw two police officers standing over the teens, their uniforms crisp under the glow of a nearby lamppost. One officer, tall and broad-shouldered, was shouting something Maya couldn't quite make out, his voice sharp and commanding. The other, shorter but equally imposing, held a flashlight that he shone directly into the face of a boy sitting on the ground. The scene felt tense, almost surreal, like something out of a movie rather than real life. Maya's heart began to race as she watched the taller officer grab the boy roughly by the arm and shove him against a tree. The boy stumbled, clearly, frightened, while his friends shouted protests. Something inside Maya stirred. She didn't know these teenagers personally, but the sight of the officer's aggression struck her as wrong. Why were they treating these kids so harshly? What had they done to deserve such treatment? Questions swirled in her mind as she instinctively reached for her phone. Without giving it much thought, she opened the camera app and started recording the interaction. Her hands trembled slightly as she zoomed in on the scene, capturing every detail. The officer's raised voice, the fear in the boy's eyes, the confusion among the other teens. Part of her hoped no one would notice, but another part wanted to document what she believed was an abuse of power. If nothing else, the footage might serve as evidence if anyone tried to deny what happened here tonight. Unbeknownst to Maya, her decision to record the incident would have far-reaching consequences. As she stood there, hidden behind a cluster of bushes, One of the officers suddenly turned his head in her direction. His gaze locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She quickly lowered her phone, hoping to avoid drawing attention to herself, but it was too late. The officer muttered something to his partner before striding toward her with purposeful steps. Panic bubbled up inside her chest as she realized she'd been spotted. Should she run? Stay put? Before she could decide, the officer called out, "Hey you, stop right there." His tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. Heart pounding, Maya hesitated for a split second before turning and walking away as calmly as she could, clutching her phone tightly in her hand. Little did she know, this encounter was just the beginning of a nightmare that would test her strength, resilience, and faith in justice. That night, as Maya lay in bed replaying the events in her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. She had always trusted the police to protect and serve, but now doubt crept into her thoughts. Had she done the right thing by recording them? Would they come looking for her? These questions haunted her as sleep eluded her, and deep down she sensed that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of day that usually lifted Maya's spirits. Birds chirped cheerfully outside her bedroom window, and sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting golden patterns on the walls. But Maya couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her chest overnight. She replayed the events from the park again and again in her mind, the shouting, the shove, the officer's piercing gaze as he spotted her recording. Every time she thought about it, her heart raced, and a knot tightened in her stomach. Still, she tried to push the memory aside, telling herself it was probably nothing. Maybe the officers hadn't seen her clearly. Maybe they wouldn't care enough to follow up. After all, what harm could a short video clip do? By mid-morning, Maya was helping her mother clean out the kitchen cabinets when there was a sharp knock at the door. The sound startled both of them, and Maya exchanged a puzzled glance with her mom before heading to answer it. When she opened the door, 3 police officers stood on the other side, their expressions stern and unyielding. For a moment, Maya froze, her breath catching in her throat. One of the officers, a tall man with close-cropped hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, stepped forward. "Maya Patel?" he asked, his voice firm. She nodded hesitantly, clutching the edge of the doorframe for support. "We need to come inside," he continued. "We have reason to believe stolen property is being stored here." Maya blinked, in disbelief. Stolen property? In her house? The accusation felt absurd, like something out of a bad dream. "That's not true," she stammered, shaking her head. "You can't just barge in without—" Before she could finish, another officer cut her off. "Are you refusing to cooperate?" he demanded, raising an eyebrow as if daring her to challenge him further. Maya's mind scrambled for the right words, but before she could respond, her mother appeared behind her, concern etched across her face. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between Maya and the officers. "Why are you accusing us of this?" The lead officer ignored her question and pushed past Maya into the house, followed by the others. Maya turned to protest, but one of them grabbed her arm, holding her back. "Don't interfere," he warned, his grip firm. Her mother gasped, rushing forward. "Let go of my daughter," she exclaimed, trying to pull Maya away. The scene quickly escalated into chaos as the officers spread out through the small home, searching every room. Drawers were yanked open, cushions were tossed aside, and shelves were emptied onto the floor. Maya watched helplessly, tears welling up in her eyes as her personal belongings were scattered and discarded like trash. Her mother pleaded with them to stop, but her cries fell on deaf ears. After nearly an hour of destruction, the officers finally concluded their search. They found nothing, no stolen goods, no evidence of wrongdoing. Yet instead of leaving quietly, they turned their attention back to Maya. "Come with us," the lead officer said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. Maya's heart sank. "Why? I didn't do anything wrong," she protested, her voice trembling. "You're under arrest for resisting arrest and obstructing justice," he replied coldly, ignoring her protests as he secured the cuffs around her wrists. Her mother screamed, clinging to her as the officers pulled her away. "This isn't fair," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "She's innocent." At the police station, Maya sat alone in a cold, sterile cell, her mind racing. How had things spiraled so quickly out of control? All she had done was record a video. Was that really a crime? As the hours dragged on, anger began to replace fear. She knew she hadn't broken any laws, yet here she was, locked away like a criminal. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a guard escorted her to a small interrogation room where a detective waited. He introduced himself as Detective Harris and launched into a series of questions, each more accusatory than the last. "Why were you filming those officers?" he asked, leaning forward in his chair. "Do you realize how dangerous that was?" Maya swallowed hard, choosing her words carefully. "I saw something I thought was wrong," she explained. "I wanted to document it. That's all." Detective Harris didn't seem satisfied. He pressed her further, asking about her involvement with the teenagers in the park and whether she had prior run-ins with law enforcement. Maya answered truthfully, growing increasingly frustrated as the interview went on. It became clear to her that the officers weren't interested in finding the truth. They were trying to build a case against her, twisting her actions to fit some predetermined narrative. By the time the questioning ended, exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. She was released later that evening, but only after promising to appear in court for a hearing. As she walked out of the station, blinking in the harsh glare of the streetlights, Maya realized her life would never be the same. News of Maya's arrest spread rapidly through the town, fueled by whispers at the grocery store, posts on social media, and conversations over backyard fences. Some residents sided with the police, believing the official story that Maya must have done something to provoke such drastic action. Others, however, were skeptical. Friends and acquaintances, who knew her well, found it hard to believe she was capable of committing a crime. Rumors swirled, dividing the community into factions. At school board meetings, parents debated the incident passionately, while local business owners discussed it over coffee. Even Rohan, Maya's younger brother, faced questions from his classmates, many of whom repeated hearsay without fully understanding the situation. Meanwhile, Maya struggled to adjust to the sudden spotlight. Walking down the street, she noticed people staring, some with pity, others with suspicion. Strangers stopped her to ask questions or offer unsolicited opinions, making her feel like a character in someone else's drama rather than a person living through a nightmare. The stress took a toll on her mental health. She barely slept, haunted by nightmares of the officers bursting into her home again. Simple tasks like going to work or running errands became daunting challenges. She avoided crowded places, fearing judgmental glances and whispered comments. Her once bright smile faded, replaced by a guarded expression that masked the turmoil within. Determined to fight back, Maya and her mother reached out to a civil rights attorney named Mr. Carter. A seasoned lawyer known for taking on cases involving police misconduct, Mr. Carter agreed to represent Maya pro bono after hearing her story. During their first meeting, he listened intently as Maya recounted the events leading up to her arrest. His expression remained calm, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of anger as he reviewed the details. "This isn't just about you," he told her gently. "It's about holding those in power accountable. If we don't stand up now, nothing will change." His words gave Maya a glimmer of hope, though doubt still lingered in the corners of her mind. As preparations for the legal battle began, Maya grappled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she felt empowered knowing she wasn't alone, that someone believed in her innocence and was willing to fight alongside her. On the other hand, the weight of the ordeal bore down on her, threatening to crush her spirit. Would anyone truly listen to her side of the story? Could she endure the scrutiny and criticism that would inevitably come with challenging authority? These questions plagued her as she lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling and wondering if justice was even possible in a world that seemed determined to silence her. Despite the uncertainty, Maya resolved to keep moving forward. With Mr. Carter's guidance, she gathered evidence to support her case. The video footage she had recorded, witness statements from people who had been at the park that night, and records of similar complaints filed against the officers involved. Each piece of information strengthened her resolve, reminding her why she had decided to speak out in the first place. As the days passed, she clung to the belief that speaking truth to power, even when it was terrifying, was worth the risk. And deep down she hoped her courage might inspire others to do the same. The days following Maya's arrest felt like a whirlwind, each moment heavier than the last. As news of her case spread beyond the confines of their small town, it began to attract attention from larger media outlets. Reporters descended upon the community, setting up cameras outside the police station and knocking on doors in search of sound bites. Local newspapers published articles dissecting every detail of the incident, while social media platforms buzzed with heated debates. Videos of the altercation in the park surfaced online, shared by witnesses who had recorded snippets of the confrontation on their phones. The grainy footage showed the officers shouting at the teenagers, one of them shoving the boy against the tree with unnecessary force. It was undeniable proof of what Maya had tried to capture that fateful night, and now the world could see it too. For Maya, the newfound attention brought both support and hostility. Friends and strangers alike rallied behind her, flooding her. Families phoned with messages of encouragement. Some even organized protests outside the police station, holding signs that read, "Justice for Maya" and "Accountability Matters." Supporters gathered in growing numbers, chanting slogans and demanding answers. Among them were members of civil rights organizations, activists, and concerned citizens who saw Maya's case as emblematic of broader issues within law enforcement. For the first time since her arrest, Maya felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone anymore. An entire movement seemed to be rising around her, but not everyone sided with Maya. Critics argued that she must have provoked the officers somehow, questioning why she had been filming them in the first place. Online trolls targeted her with hateful comments, accusing her of seeking fame or causing trouble where none existed. Death threats poured into her social media accounts, forcing her family to deactivate her profiles and install security cameras around their home. At school board meetings and town halls, tensions flared as residents debated whether Maya was a victim or a troublemaker. The division cut deep, fracturing friendships and turning neighbors against one another. Even some of Maya's former classmates distanced themselves, fearing backlash for associating with her. Amidst the chaos, Maya leaned heavily on her attorney, Mr. Carter, whose calm demeanor and sharp legal mind provided a steadying influence. Together, they pored over evidence, strategizing how best to present her case in court. Mr. Carter explained that while public opinion was important, the real battle would take place inside the courtroom, where facts and logic ruled. He encouraged Maya to stay focused, reminding her that the road ahead would be long and difficult. "They'll try to paint you as the villain," he warned during one of their meetings, "but we'll make sure the truth comes out." As preparations intensified, more revelations came to light. Through meticulous investigation, Mr. Carter uncovered troubling patterns in the officers' conduct. Both men had histories of complaints filed against them, accusations of excessive force, racial profiling, and verbal abuse. But these grievances had largely gone unaddressed. Internal investigations had either been dismissed or buried, allowing the officers to continue serving without consequence. When this information leaked to the press, outrage erupted. Protesters added new chants to their rallies: "No more cover-ups," and "Protect us from them." The pressure mounted on the police department, which found itself under intense scrutiny from both the public and higher authorities. Behind closed doors, cracks began to form within the ranks of the police force. Officers whispered among themselves, some expressing sympathy for Maya while others defended their colleagues. Tensions simmered as leadership scrambled to contain the fallout. The police chief issued a carefully worded statement promising transparency and accountability, but stopped short of admitting wrongdoing. Meanwhile, the two officers involved in Maya's arrest were temporarily suspended pending further review, a move seen by many as damage control rather than genuine reform. Despite the mounting evidence against them, Maya remained acutely aware of the risks she faced. Speaking out against powerful institutions was never easy, especially when those institutions wielded significant influence over public perception. Every interview request, every appearance at a protest rally, carried the potential for backlash. Yet Maya refused to back down. With Mr. Carter's guidance, she began sharing her story publicly, speaking at town hall meetings and granting interviews to trusted journalists. Her words resonated deeply with audiences, particularly young people who admired her courage. "I didn't do anything wrong," she told a packed auditorium during one emotional speech. "All I did was stand up for what I believed was right. And if we let fear stop us from doing that, then nothing will ever change." Her bravery inspired others to come forward with their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of law enforcement. A local teacher recounted being pulled over repeatedly for no apparent reason. A retired veteran described being handcuffed during a routine traffic stop because the officer claimed he matched a description. Each account added fuel to the fire, amplifying calls for systemic reform. Community leaders joined forces to draft proposals for increased oversight, including mandatory body cameras for all officers and independent review boards to investigate misconduct allegations. These initiatives gained traction quickly, with petitions circulating widely and signatures pouring in from across the state. Yet for all the progress being made, Maya couldn't escape the personal toll the ordeal was taking. The constant scrutiny left her feeling exposed and vulnerable. She struggled to sleep, plagued by nightmares of the officers storming her house again. Simple tasks, like grocery shopping or walking her dog, became daunting challenges as she braced herself for judgmental stares and whispered remarks. Her once vibrant personality dimmed under the weight of stress and anxiety. Friends noticed the change and urged her to seek counseling, but Maya resisted, insisting she needed to stay strong for the sake of the case. Deep down, though, she wondered how much longer she could endure. Rohan, her younger brother, bore the burden silently, absorbing the tension that filled their home. Once carefree and playful, he grew withdrawn, spending hours alone in his room playing video games or sketching pictures in his notebook. His grades slipped, and teachers reported he seemed distracted in class. One evening, as Maya tucked him into bed, he looked up at her with tear-filled eyes. "Why are they so mean to you?" he asked softly. Maya hesitated, unsure how to explain something she barely understood herself. Finally, she knelt beside him and took his hand. "Because sometimes people don't like it when others speak the truth," she said gently. "But that doesn't mean we should stop trying." Her mother, too, bore the strain of the situation, juggling long shifts at the hospital with endless phone calls from reporters and supporters. Though fiercely protective of her children, she often broke down in private, overwhelmed by guilt for not being able to shield them from harm. On nights when Maya lay awake staring at the ceiling, she would hear faint sobs coming from her mother's bedroom and feel a pang of helplessness. This fight wasn't just hers, it belonged to her entire family, and they were all paying the price. Still, despite the hardships, Maya clung to moments of hope. Letters arrived daily from strangers thanking her for standing up, offering words of encouragement and solidarity. Parents wrote about teaching their children the importance of speaking out against injustice, using her story as an example. Young activists reached out, asking for advice on how to organize protests or advocate for change in their own communities. These connections reminded Maya that her struggle extended far beyond her small town, that it was part of a larger movement toward fairness and equality. With each passing day, the momentum continued to build. Lawyers reviewed evidence, journalists investigated leads, and activists planned demonstrations. Slowly but surely, the pieces fell into place, setting the stage for what promised to be a landmark trial. For Maya, the journey was far from over. But as she stood alongside her supporters, surrounded by voices calling for justice, she allowed herself to believe, for the first time, that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The day of the trial arrived, bringing with it a storm of emotions that swept through the small town like a tidal wave. The courthouse, an imposing brick building with tall columns and heavy wooden doors, was packed to capacity long before the proceedings began. Supporters of Maya filled the benches on one side of the courtroom, their faces etched with determination and hope. Many wore buttons pinned to their shirts that read, "Justice for Maya," while others clutched handmade signs they planned to display outside after the hearing. On the opposite side sat those who still defended the police officers, friends, colleagues, and individuals skeptical of Maya's version of events. The atmosphere crackled with tension, each group glaring across the aisle as if daring the other to speak first. Maya sat at the plaintiff's table alongside Mr. Carter, her attorney, gripping the edge of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. She wore a simple navy blue dress chosen specifically because it conveyed seriousness without being overly formal. Her hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, and she had applied minimal makeup, wanting nothing about her appearance to distract from the substance of her case. Despite her outward composure, her heart raced as she glanced around the room. Reporters scribbled notes furiously in the press section, cameras clicked softly, and murmurs rippled through the crowd. For a moment she felt overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't just about her anymore. This trial represented something much bigger, a test of whether ordinary citizens could hold powerful institutions accountable. The judge entered the courtroom, a stern-looking woman in her late 50s with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor. As everyone rose to their feet, silence fell over the room like a heavy curtain. After taking her seat, she instructed the court clerk to swear in the first witness, Detective Harris, the officer who had interrogated Maya at the station. Dressed in his uniform, Harris walked confidently to the stand, his boots clicking against the tiled floor. Under questioning from the defense attorney representing the accused officers, he described Maya as uncooperative and defiant during her arrest. "She refused to answer our questions clearly," he stated, his tone firm. "We were simply doing our job." When it was Mr. Carter's turn to cross-examine, he leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but pointed. "Detective Harris," he began, "is it standard procedure to handcuff someone immediately upon entering their home, even when no evidence of wrongdoing has been found?" Harris hesitated, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "In certain situations, yes," he replied cautiously. "And is it also standard procedure," Mr. Carter continued, "to accuse someone of resisting arrest when they have done nothing more than ask for clarification regarding their rights?" The courtroom fell silent as Harris struggled to respond. His evasive answers only fueled skepticism among observers, many of whom exchanged knowing glances. Next, witnesses who had been present at the park the night of the altercation took the stand. One by one, they recounted what they had seen: the aggressive behavior of the officers, the fear on the teenagers' faces, and Maya standing off to the side, quietly recording the scene. Their testimonies painted a vivid picture of chaos and intimidation, reinforcing the idea that the officers had acted recklessly. When it came time for Maya to testify, she approached the stand with trembling hands, but unwavering resolve. As she recounted the events leading up to her arrest, her voice wavered at times, betraying the emotional toll the ordeal had taken. But she never faltered, meeting the gaze of the jury head-on as she spoke. "All I wanted was to document what I thought was wrong," she said firmly. "I didn't expect my life to be turned upside down because of it." Throughout the trial, the prosecution worked tirelessly to discredit Maya's claims, portraying her as reckless and irresponsible. They argued that her decision to film the officers constituted interference, suggesting that her actions had provoked the situation. At one point, the lead prosecutor questioned why she hadn't simply walked away instead of recording. "Isn't it true," he pressed, "that you deliberately sought to antagonize the officers by filming them?" Maya's response was measured yet powerful. "If documenting wrongdoing is considered antagonizing, then maybe we need to rethink what kind of society we want to live in," she replied, earning nods of approval from her supporters. As the days wore on, expert witnesses were called to analyze the video footage Maya had recorded. Forensic specialists broke down frame-by-frame images, highlighting details that supported her account. An independent investigator testified that the officers' conduct violated departmental policies on use of force and public interaction. Each piece of evidence added weight to Maya's case, chipping away at the credibility of the defense. By the time closing arguments rolled around, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Mr. Carter delivered a passionate speech, urging the jury to consider not only the facts of the case, but also its broader implications. "This isn't just about Maya Patel," he declared. "It's about every person who has ever felt powerless in the face of authority. If we let fear dictate our actions, if we allow abuses of power to go unchecked, then justice becomes meaningless." Finally, after hours of deliberation behind closed doors, the jury returned with their verdict. The courtroom held its collective breath as the foreperson stood to deliver the decision. "On the charge of resisting arrest," she announced, pausing briefly for effect, "we find the defendant, Maya Patel, not guilty." A wave of cheers erupted from Maya's supporters, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. The foreperson continued, addressing the charges against the officers. "We find officers James Reed and Michael Holt guilty of misconduct and violation of civil rights." Gasps echoed through the room as reality sank in. Tears streamed down Maya's face as she hugged Mr. Carter, disbelief mingling with relief. Outside, supporters erupted into celebration, chanting and embracing one another as news of the verdict spread. But victory came with scars. Though vindicated in the eyes of the law, Maya knew the battle had left lasting wounds. Death threats persisted, forcing her family to remain vigilant despite increased security measures. Nights were still restless, haunted by memories of the raid on her home and the cold stares of strangers. Yet amidst the pain, there were moments of triumph. Local officials implemented reforms inspired by the case, mandating body cameras for all officers and establishing independent oversight committees. Schools invited Maya to speak at assemblies, where students listened intently as she shared her story and encouraged them to stand up for what they believed in. For Rohan, life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as possible. He resumed playing soccer with his friends and brought home better grades, though he remained fiercely protective of his sister. Their mother, too, found solace in routine, channeling her energy into advocating for systemic change within the community. Together, the Patel family rebuilt their lives, drawing strength from one another and the unwavering support of those who believed in Maya's cause. Reflecting on everything she had endured, Maya realized how much she had grown. No longer the quiet girl content to blend into the background, she emerged stronger, more resilient, and deeply committed to using her voice for good. Journalism school applications sat neatly stacked on her desk, each essay carefully crafted to convey her passion for uncovering truths hidden in plain sight. As she looked toward the future, Maya carried with her the lessons of the past, not just the hardships but the hope that even in the darkest moments, speaking truth to power could spark meaningful change. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, she faced it with courage, knowing she had already made a difference. The verdict marked a turning point not just for Maya Patel, but for the entire town. What had started as an ordinary summer evening in the park had grown into a movement that forced people to confront uncomfortable truths about power, accountability, and justice. For Maya, the victory was bittersweet. While the court's decision validated her innocence and exposed the misconduct of the officers involved, it couldn't erase the trauma she and her family had endured. The scars ran deep. Sleepless nights, haunted by memories of the raid on their home, the sting of hateful comments online, and the lingering fear that someone might still try to harm them. Yet, despite these wounds, Maya refused to let bitterness take root. Instead, she chose to focus on the positive changes her case had inspired. In the weeks following the trial, the town buzzed with activity as new policies were implemented to ensure greater transparency within the police department. Body cameras became mandatory for all officers, and independent oversight committees were established to review complaints of misconduct. These reforms didn't happen overnight. They were the result of relentless advocacy from community leaders, activists, and everyday citizens who saw Maya's story as a catalyst for change. Town hall meetings drew record attendance, with residents voicing their concerns and demanding accountability. Even those who had initially doubted Maya began to acknowledge the need for reform, realizing that systemic issues affected everyone, not just one young woman. For Maya, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. She resumed working at the library, shelving books and helping patrons find stories that transported them to different worlds. But something inside her had shifted. The experience had awakened a fire she hadn't known existed, a fierce determination to fight for fairness and equality. Her dream of becoming a journalist took on new meaning. No longer content to simply observe the world around her, Maya wanted to uncover hidden injustices and give a voice to those who felt powerless. She poured her energy into applying to journalism, schools, crafting essays that reflected her journey and aspirations. Each application was a testament to her resilience, a declaration that she wouldn't let adversity define her. Her younger brother, Rohan, also began to heal. The once shy boy who had retreated into himself during the darkest days of the ordeal re-emerged with newfound confidence. He joined the school debate team, surprising even himself with his ability to articulate complex ideas. Inspired by Maya's courage, he learned to stand up for what he believed in, whether it was defending a classmate being bullied or challenging unfair rules at school. At home, he remained fiercely protective of his sister, often reminding her to lock the doors and check the security cameras before bed. Though their bond had always been strong, the shared trauma brought them closer than ever. Their mother, too, found purpose in the aftermath of the trial. Having spent years caring for others as a nurse, she now channeled her compassion into advocating for systemic change. She attended workshops on restorative justice, volunteered with organizations focused on police reform, and spoke passionately at community events about the importance of holding institutions accountable. Her efforts earned her recognition as a leader in the movement, though she humbly insisted she was just doing what any parent would do to protect their children. "It's not about me," she often said. "It's about making sure no other family has to go through what we did." As the months passed, Maya's story continued to resonate far beyond the borders of her small town. Journalists from national outlets reached out, eager to document how a teenager's act of bravery had sparked widespread reform. Documentaries were made, articles written, and podcasts recorded, each highlighting the ripple effect of Maya's courage. People across the country followed her journey, drawing inspiration from her refusal to stay silent in the face of injustice. Strangers wrote letters thanking her for standing up, sharing how her story had motivated them to speak out against wrongdoing in their own lives. One letter in particular stood out. It came from a young girl in another state who had witnessed similar abuse of power, but had been too afraid to report it. "Because of you," the girl wrote, "I know I can make a difference." Maya's resolve only grew stronger with time. She enrolled in journalism school the following fall, immersing herself in classes that taught her how to investigate, write, and tell stories that mattered. Her professors quickly recognized her potential, praising her sharp instincts and unwavering dedication. Assignments that required students to tackle difficult topics, police brutality, racial inequality, environmental injustice, felt like second nature to Maya, who approached each task with the same tenacity she had shown during her legal battle. Outside of class, she interned at local news outlets, honing her skills and building connections within the industry. Every article she wrote, every interview she conducted, brought her one step closer to fulfilling her dream of exposing truths that others tried to ignore. Despite her growing success, Maya never forgot where she came from. Whenever she returned home for holidays or weekends, she made it a point to visit the park where everything had begun. Sitting on a bench overlooking the pond, she watched children play tag and families picnic under the shade of towering oak trees. The memory of that fateful night still lingered, but it no longer felt suffocating. Instead, it served as a reminder of how far she and her community had come. On one such visit, she noticed a plaque near the entrance of the park. Installed by the town council, it read, "Dedicated to Maya Patel, whose courage inspired us to seek truth and justice." Tears welled up in her eyes as she traced the engraved words with her fingers. For so long she had doubted whether speaking out was worth the cost. Now, standing there amidst laughter and sunlight, she knew it was. Her journey wasn't without challenges, Death threats occasionally resurfaced, forcing her family to remain vigilant. Critics still questioned her motives, accusing her of seeking fame or attention. But Maya had learned to tune out the noise, focusing instead on the work that lay ahead. She understood that change was rarely linear. Setbacks were inevitable, but perseverance could overcome even the toughest obstacles. With Mr. Carter's guidance, she filed a civil lawsuit against the officers involved in her arrest, seeking damages for emotional distress and violation of her rights. The case dragged on for months, but when the settlement finally came through, Maya donated a portion of the money to organizations dedicated to criminal justice reform. "This isn't about revenge," she explained during an interview. "It's about creating a better future for everyone." That future looked brighter with each passing day. Schools invited Maya to speak at assemblies, where students listened intently as she recounted her experiences and encouraged them to use their voices for good. Teachers incorporated her story into lesson plans, teaching kids about civic responsibility and the importance of standing up for what is right. Activists sought her advice on organizing protests and advocating for policy changes. Though Maya sometimes felt overwhelmed by the weight of expectations, she embraced her role as a symbol of hope. "If my story can inspire even one person to believe in themselves," she told a crowd during a rally, "then everything I went through will have been worth it." Looking back on the past year, Maya marveled at how much had changed, not just in her life, but in the world around her. The small town she had grown up in was no longer defined by complacency. Conversations about accountability and fairness had become commonplace, sparking initiatives that extended beyond policing to education, healthcare, and housing. Neighbors who had once avoided discussing controversial topics now gathered regularly to brainstorm solutions. Even the skeptics, those who had doubted Maya's intentions, began to see the value in questioning authority and demanding transparency. For Maya, the fight was far from over. Journalism school provided her with the tools she needed to amplify marginalized voices and shed light on systemic inequities. Her first major project, an investigative piece on wrongful arrests in underserved communities, garnered widespread acclaim, earning her accolades from peers and professionals alike. As she stood on stage accepting an award for excellence in reporting, Maya thought about the shy 18-year-old girl who had once feared using her voice. That girl seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by a confident young woman determined to leave the world better than she found it. The road ahead would undoubtedly be filled with challenges, but Maya faced them with courage and conviction. She carried with her the lessons of her ordeal, the importance of resilience, the power of community, and the belief that speaking truth to power could ignite meaningful change. And though the scars of her past would always remain, they served as reminders of her strength, proof that even in the face of overwhelming odds, she had refused to give up. As she walked off stage that night, applause echoing in her ears, Maya smiled. Her story was just beginning,